Hi there folks, it is I, your diversity dude. There's a lot of talk in the media these days over the use of the term visible minority, and I thought it was time for me to chime in. To bring everyone up to speed, according to the Government of Canada's Justice Laws website, the term visible minority, or more specifically, members of visible minorities, means, quote, persons other than Aboriginal peoples who are non-Caucasian in race or non-white in color, end quote. It stems from the Employment Equity Act that was originally introduced into law in 1996 and last updated in 1995. Quoting from the Act, "The purpose of this Act is to achieve equality in the workplace so that no person shall be denied employment, opportunities, or benefits for reasons unrelated to ability, and, in the fulfillment of that goal, to correct the conditions of disadvantage in employment experienced by women, Aboriginal peoples, persons with disabilities, and members of visible minorities, by giving effect to the principle that employment equity means more than treating persons in the same way, but also requires special measures and the accommodation of differences," end quote. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? There are a few issues at play here, and I want to address them individually. First, it needs to be said that the Employment Equity Act is painfully outdated. Apparently changes were tabled to the Act in 2006, but a certain Prime Minister, who shall remain unnamed, prorogued the House and the changes fell off the table and were swept under the proverbial rug. Not to say that the changes would have made things better, since we don't know what they were, but I just wanted to get a dig in about proroguing the House. The Act, at its core, pushes an important issue: equity in employment. The problem I have with it, however, is twofold. First, the two governing bodies of the Act, the Canadian Human Rights Commission and Human Resources Skills Development Canada, are totally underfunded, under-resourced, and don't have enough teeth to enforce the Act. I can't tell you the number of employers who have said, "What is the bare minimum we have to do to be in compliance?" Or even worse, "Do you really think we'll get caught?" Not exactly the sentiment we're going for. The second, and probably more important issue I have, is that the Act is painfully out of date. It excludes several groups that are arguably in need of the services the Act is purported to provide. At this point, the Employment Equity Act is actually more exclusionary than it is inclusionary. On top of that, the Employment Equity Act only covers employers that are federally regulated or part of the Federal Contractors Program. That only represents about 6% of the Canadian workforce. What about everyone else? Now let's get to the meat of the debate, which has to do with the term visible minority. So, what is a visible minority? Defined by the Act, it's a person who isn't white. Okay, I get that. The original settlers of Canada, in fact, most people who immigrated to this great but arguably heat-deprived country up until around 1970, were of British, French, or Western European descent, also known as the Sun Challenged. 40 years ago, the number of people that would count as visible minority was about 300,000, or 2% of Canada's population. 25 years later, when the term visible minority was first minted, that number had gone up by nearly 400% to over 1.1 million. 15 years after that, according to the 2001 census, that number had gone up again by 400% to over 4 million. According to Statistics Canada, the visible minority will be the visible majority in cities like Toronto and Vancouver by 2031, and debatably already is in that position today. But what is a visible minority, and why are we grouping them all together as one? A person of Chinese heritage is a visible minority. So is a person of Jamaican descent. Do they face the same barriers to employment? Do they share the same history or cultural values? And what about a person of Indian descent who was born and raised in Canada versus a person of the same ethnic heritage that arrived in Canada today? There isn't one visible minority community. There are multiple visible minority communities. Now add in that the term has actually been deemed racist. The United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination asked Canada to reflect on the use of the term visible minority. Apparently we reflected and did absolutely nothing about it. And by we, I certainly don't mean me, since the only thing I've been reflecting on is that my dry cleaner is clearly shrinking my suits and I'm paying for a gym membership for absolutely no reason. I'm not saying we should eliminate the use of the term or the act. Far from it. We need a term. It's a bucket that helps us to focus on a particular group. We love our buckets, and heaven knows we have a lot of them. And we need an act that helps to level the playing field for all people when it comes to opportunity and employment. But we need to update both to be more reflective of the realities of today. So, as for the term visible minority, stick a fork in it because it's done. Peace out.